Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name, of course, is Cesar Chris, and today we boldly go where no WoW player has gone before. Except, really, that's actually where a lot of them are going. We're going to talk about Final Fantasy XIV in 2019. That was weirdly a very confusing sentence for me to say, but that is the title of the video as well, so there you go. And realistically, this video is going to be very introductory. In the background, you're going to be watching me open the game, make my new character, check out the world, explore, feel it, right? Because it's really hard to get to know a game without playing it. Because I've been watching Final Fantasy XIV videos for a really long time. Through all the ups and downs of my many MMOs, I'd sit there watching Final Fantasy XIV videos and thinking about how bad it sucked. While I, in fact, was tired of my own sucky game, and as a regular MMO player, I was just hating on everything else. And somewhere I broke and I became changed, and I have accepted that I can enjoy more than one MMO. And I know for some of you that's going to be hard to hear, but it's true. Sometimes change is good. And if I haven't been too negative and forced you away from this video, let's get into it. So what you're watching here is me entering the game, making my character, yada yada yada. This is the free trial. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't pay money for games if there is a free trial that I can start with. With that being said, and I can already hear the Final Fantasy XIV players typing it up, the game gets much better, specifically the combat gets much better later on, apparently, is what I'm told, is what everyone says. And to be honest, I'll let you in on a little secret. Almost every game gets better when you get to max level or higher levels. That's true. But apparently that's very true of this game. Apparently the combat gets better, and so does the story, because the story it's crazy. I'm someone who is very, very Western in my games, specifically their stories. I believe in castles and in dwarfs and in monsters. And in this game, I see a lot of magical darkness that penetrates my body and soul and makes me consider everything in the world. And for a while, it gets pretty scary, but it is very magical too. And you know what? No, let's talk about this. Throughout the game, you're gonna have a lot of cutscenes that are kind of darkness. They kind of feel like you're not on the planet anymore, because they're kind of happening in your head, or you might be in space or something. And for a new player who hasn't played Final Fantasy XIV, I found that very weird. I found it very separating from the feeling of playing the game. Kind of like this wasn't really happening, like this was sort of a very side story, and because of that I felt very inclined to skip them, which is also a bad habit that I've been taught from WoW. I mean, you know, the only reason quest text is there is to push skip. No, but I did my best to keep going with it, and it is telling a story of some sorts. It seems very big in scope, and because of that, I don't feel like I fully understand it yet, and I think it's something that will become more interesting the further I continue to learn about it. This happens when you're brought into space. It happens a lot like when you first make your character, and I don't know if space is the right term here. It's just a very dark background. You eventually meet some big crystals that are pretty cool, and it's really kind of implied-ish that you're like seeing this in your head because you're talking to other NPCs about these weird things you're seeing. So I think it's a pretty cool tangent. Maybe this is the terrible story that I'm talking about that will end up not being anything, but maybe it's the great story that becomes like amazing later on. So I'll have to continue playing the sea. Obviously you'll have to watch some higher up footage to enjoy it. So obviously you have to subscribe to me to watch that. There's no way you could look up a different YouTube video to get that. You have to get it here. You heard that. Boom, done, subscribed. But really, let's continue on. What are some other things I liked? I feel like everything I'm gonna say I have like a like/dislike of, which is very common, I think, for starting new games, because you're so entrenched in your old ways of thinking that it's really hard to come to a new world. And for me, the idea that your character can play multiple classes or jobs, as it were, in this game later on, is something that's kind of good and kind of bad. Like, I really love the idea that I could just level the one character and that I could just flip through whatever job I want to play. Yes, there's some work to do that, so I'm told. I haven't gotten really to that point. But it's kind of freeing that way, that I don't feel like, do I really want to make this character? Is it really what I want to get to max level? It's very liberating for new characters to know that you have that freedom later on. Whereas in World of Warcraft, when you've sat there and you've smashed your head against the ground leveling up a priest to max level, and all of a sudden you want to be these fancy hunters that don't have to push a button to do top DPS. Shots were not fired. You have to remake the whole thing, and unless you're going to pay for it, which, I mean, let's be honest, that's kind of the end game for old Blizzard there, but it's disheartening for new players, for sure. The downside of this is really the idea that my warrior, that's obviously going to be the tiniest race you could possibly make and the most adorable, has to also be my cute little archer, who's also my cute little healer, who's also my cute little, paladin. Look at me trying to struggle to think of all the class names. I'll get better once I actually get to max level and start seeing all the classes, or jobs. Do you guys prefer jobs or classes? What do Final Fantasy 14 people actually call them? Because I feel like a lot of games, like, for instance, Guild Wars 2, they're called professions. Like, that's what the classes are called. Confusing, because there is actually professions in the game too. I think most people just refer to them as classes. And I don't know if that's the same thing in Final Fantasy 14 or not. But yeah. I also think people call it 14 instead of saying Final Fantasy 14 every time, because it's a pretty big mouthful. So I might just refer to it 14 as 14, unless I forget. Moving forward, the game is interesting. It's very similar to WoW when it comes down to questing. Like, there's, question marks and check marks, and you go get the question marks to turn them into check marks to get experience. That's the name of the game at low levels. There's nothing really different. There are a lot of just killing and collecting and that kind of stuff. So you'll feel pretty at home, which home is kind of boring and tedious, but that's okay, because there's promises of more interesting stuff to come in the future. The actual environments are really nice. I think the colors of the first area that I started in were a little bit meh until it turned into night. The skybox of stars is beautiful compared to World of Warcraft. WoW's skyboxes, and not all of them, but some of them are just trash. Like, some of them are stunning, but there's a lot of those skyboxes that if they just revamp those even, it would change the entire world. And I'm kind of waiting for the day that they actually do, but I don't know if they will. There's a lot of other things that seem to be weirdly more important to World of Warcraft at this time. But yeah. So I think you'll feel pretty at home as a WoW player. I found it to be, and in this video, I'm a ranged character enjoying my ranged skills. In another gaming session, I made the Lancer and tried out the sort of more close range skills, and I wanted to see kind of which ones felt particularly different than the others. They felt very similar to WoW, where the close range you could kind of move around while you're casting. Long range, like, there's certain classes that have more mobility than others while casting. Some of the cast times are extremely long. Specifically, you'll notice this if you watch higher end, like, magicians and sort of like those bigger casters. Some of those casts are quite long, and you do feel pretty locked down, but they're pretty big and meaty to compensate for that, and I think that's kind of the trade-off you need to have. So I think the classes in this game really do a great job. I think there's something for everyone. There is, once again, the tanks, the healers, the DPS being split between the ranged and non-ranged characters. There is more complex ways of looking at them as well. You could have sort of the magic ish people versus the physical-ish people. And then you get into the very minute things about who can actually buff parties, who's more supportive, who's more personal DPS, who's like supportive heals, who's like direct healing, and then the differences of the tanks in terms of survivability versus group support. But that is way beyond the scope of this video, and is hopefully something that I'll be able to make once I've played a few different classes. So come back to me with that. And if you have a specific class that you've been sort of ogling in your time on YouTube, and you're like, I would play Final Fantasy XIV if I could play that one class, but I'm not sure how I feel about it, you know, say that in the comments below, and maybe I'll make that as my next class. No promises, but maybe I'll do that for you, kind internet friend. But yeah, if you watch my next video, I will for sure do that to you. I can't be a beggar and a chooser. I'm definitely a beggar at this point, and I will do anything for more viewership. So take the hint. But yeah, that's pretty much all about me. I definitely enjoyed my first little bit of playing this game. I think that I definitely need to learn a lot more about the systems. There was what seemed to be like events happening near me, which were kind of like group quests that everyone could join in, and I'm forgetting the name that was given in this actual game for them, but it was kind of cool. Like, it would be like a bunch of elite-ish monsters would spawn, and me and a bunch of party members could kill them down to sort of finish the challenge of killing them. We'd get like a little bit of experience and stuff like that. So there's some cool dynamic events, if you will, that spawn while you're leveling to keep it a bit interesting. But for now, it's really just been collect, drop off, collect, drop off. So I'll report back to you with more information. If you do want to follow this, toss me a like, toss me a subscribe. I said that weird. I'll be very, very grateful, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.